Hey folks, Brad Scott here from Canadian Cowboy Outdoors. Thanks again for joining me for another episode of Canadian Cowboy Outdoors Presents. Today we're going back into the weeds. We're going deep into the thick of things, and we're going to be skipping some frogs across the lily pads to catch some largemouth bass. I'm going to share with you some super secret techniques that I like to use that increases my odds of hooking up and landing some of those bass that we find back in those pads. So stay tuned for Frog in the Lilies with Canadian Cowboy Outdoors. Now the long rod helps for many reasons. When I'm working my bait, just like this, if I have a pocket off to the left, I can move that bait. I can get 2-3 foot action over to the left a little bit. I can get 2 to 3 foot over this way if I want to get my bait over a hole. One of my favorite methods, of course, for frogging is putting that frog out and getting it to go over top of some of those little holes, those pockets in the lily pads. And if I can steer it left and right and hit 2 or 3 extra holes on the way back, that's 2 or 3 more opportunities for me to catch a fish on my way back instead of just skipping it through the thickest part of the weeds where it's hard for me to get a hit. Another reason is because I like to drop the rod and feel the fish before I set the hook. That's usually one of the biggest mistakes people make, is they set the hook too fast. I drop the rod and feel the fish. When you got 7'11", you drop a lot of line, and that gives that fish a lot of slack to take that lure away. But the downside is you need to recoup. You need to gain that line back once you drop that line. It's 7'11" with just, for my tip, that's down here at like 8 o'clock, to bring it all the way up to a hook set at 12 or 1, I'm moving it 10 to 12 feet. So I'm picking up 10 to 12 feet just with the rod tip moving. So that's going to pick up a lot of line and going to help you set that hook when you want it really fast. There is no hesitation between when I go to set the hook and the line tightening up. That's a big deal to me. The third and most important reason for me is when I'm frogging, I like to get way back in the rhubarb. But a lot of times I can't get there with my boat. So what I will do is I will use my very long rod, and I can get back places where my boat can't. And that means I don't have to get that far into the weeds with my boat. And if I do happen to hook a fish, I do have the power and the rod and the gear ratio to pull that fish all the way back into the boat through those weeds. I don't have to power my boat through these weeds here. I just got to power my lure through. And with a long rod, that's how I do it. The line that I use, straight up, Suffix 832. That's it. 30-pound test, straight reel to lure, Suffix 832. Nothing less than 30-pound test. Some go 50. That's fine. I don't think I'm catching anything that's going to take on 50 line. Let's see if we can't show you where the fish are and how we get them out with this Suffix 832 line. You hit those holes, pause, hit that hole and pause. I can lose half a reel of line on a cast. There's some real junk back there. Man, I can't wait to get my frog over top of that. Right there. Through that junk and into that hole right there. I love just bobbing it in a hole. go. Come on out. Let me help you out of there. There we go. Just like that. That, my friend, is some nice frog action. All right, well, that's the problem there. Under jaw. There we go. There we go. Nice. One of the simplest little tips that I have for you for frogging is to add some weight to your frog. You see, when we have a hollow body frog like this, that's totally void of water in its belly, it'll float up high. It'll float up high on the surface, see, like that, and it creates a lot of surface tension. So it takes a lot of suction to pull that frog off the surface to get it in the frog's mouth. What I like to do, sometimes it happens naturally throughout the course of the day, but what I like to do is I like to take my frog and I like to fill it up with water, right? I like to fill up with water until it actually sits nose up in the air like that on the paws. So you see how much more of that body of that frog is underwater? When I skip it across the weeds, it's just as weedless. But when it pauses, it sits down with the hooks pointing straight up. That bass comes from underneath. It has very little surface tension that it takes to bring that frog underwater into that fish's mouth. That's my secret for hooking up on a lot of extra bass and a lot, forget getting those missed strikes. That's going to get you a lot more hooks into them. Also, it helps with a lot more distance in your cast as well. And it's a very easy add. It still floats just as well on the thick stuff. When you get to the edge, it sits really nose up, hooks hanging down. Very easy for that fish to bring it underwater. And you're going to find you're going to have a lot less missed strikes, a lot more hookups if you put water in your frog belly like that. Again, naturally, sometimes the frog fills up with water as you're fishing because it, pulls on a weed, maybe it gets a little suction. Sometimes it loses water, casting, hitting the water, whatever. So every once in a while I check it. I can tell by the weight when I cast it. Check it going, that's floating a little high. So I'm just gonna go down and add a little water to it. I'm gonna check his buoyancy. There we go. Nose up. That's the buoyancy I want. Not quite neutral. I want to see that frog. I want to see exactly where it's at when it's in the water. But I want those fish to be able to pull it underwater really easy. Let's see if it works here. That nose, see, I can see that nose sticking out. That's where I want to know where that lure is. Let's just have it sit there a sec. So I do get asked about skipping the frog across the heavy weeds, and how do I deal with the fact that I could get strikes while I do that, but I'm moving it so fast. Oh, there's a miss right there. And wait and feel it, and then set the hook. There we go. I'm not worried about skipping it across the weeds and missing. Oh, I lost him. And about missing them, because just like any fish that just might miss your worm or miss your crankbait, if they don't get a hook in them, they're just going to come back for it a lot of times. So I have no worries about letting that fish follow that bait. If it misses it, I'm going fast. Yeah, didn't quite get the best hook set in that guy. Obviously lost him in the weeds, but listen, I still got a hook into him. I moved him. I don't think he's coming back for a little bit. I think old Rockjaw's got lockjaw. Get myself out of these pads here. Finding good frog bait territory isn't terribly hard. It isn't rocket science. you do want to find, you know, floating vegetation. It can be lettuce, it can be, you know, thick cabbage tops that are out at the surface. Lily pads, obviously, are your classic. Coontail, oh, there's a fish. Hit. There, you see I felt him and set the hook. Lily pads like this. Coontails. This is a nice fish. Let's see if I can't get him out of there now. There he comes. I'll tell you. Nice. Let's get you up here, bad boy. There's a nice frog bass right there. And right down the gullet. That's because I put water into my frog and allowed that bass to suck it down easy. All right. Get another picture of this guy. Nice. After I work the edge, then I see there's open pockets. There, back in the weeds. I'm gonna cast past those pockets. Like that. So I can work it towards there, same as working the edge. But then when I get to it, then I pause. And let it sit in that open water. Let it swim. Give it a dip, dip. Let it bob a few times. Once I'm back in the thick stuff, I skip it across pretty fast. I prefer my bass to hit on the edge and not in the thickest part of the weeds if I want to get a hookup. I'll cast past, move it into the open area, and let it sit. So a little bit different than when I'm working a wake bait, where I say, or a popper, or even a jitterbug or anything else that you're working on a surface bait in open water. When you cast it, you let it sit and you let it soak there for 30 seconds or so. With the frog bait, because I've added water to it and it's heavy already, when it hits the water, it makes a big splash in the pads, but I get it moving right away. If it lands in a thick weeds, I don't really want a fish to hit it there. I want it to hit the water and then get it moving, and then as soon as it gets to open water, then pause. All right, I get those fish's attention, get them to follow it, and then give them the opportunity to hit it where you have the best chance of that fish hooking up, not just striking. Everyone loves the topwater strike, sure, so do I. But I love hooking up too. And when your hooking percentage, you know, is below 50%, you've got to start thinking, where is your bait when the fish are striking? How come they're missing it? Well, here we go, folks. Last frog fish of the day. Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining me here on Canadian Cowboy Outdoors today. Hopefully you learned a little something about frogging the bass in heavy cover. Say, listen, don't just watch somebody else catch fish. Learn how and do it yourself. Bye.